sometimes you find something in a video game that makes you think you found a discovery straight from hell. This is why today we're diving into 7 more video game discoveries from hell. SWAT 4. Thanks to Justabear for submitting this mystery on Oddheader.com. SWAT 4 is a first-person shooter released in 2005 for Windows by Bioshock developer Irrational Games. The game has the player command their own SWAT team, emphasizing strategy rather than use of force, so players have to tactically respond to missions with as few casualties as possible. Much of the gameplay follows the actual rules of engagement used by militaries across the world, which dictate when the use of force is acceptable. A data miner, however, encountered something in the files of the game that SWAT teams likely have never been trained on, as PHP Miner on Reddit discovered an unused animation that appears to show a character in a state of demonic possession, violently convulsing, and even hovering a few feet into the air. Even stranger, the animation is titled Gargoyle in the files, which really doesn't make sense considering I've never seen a gargoyle move like that, or at all. Whatever this animation was supposed to be, unfortunately we may be out of answers, as SWAT 4 lacks any plot whatsoever, instead dropping players across a series of unconnected missions with no context. So whether or not this dude was actually possessed by a demon, or is just really getting down to some Nickelback, remains a mystery. Faith, the Unholy Trinity. Thanks to FunkyPG HD and SeaChameleon for submitting these mysteries on the Oddheader Discord. Faith, the Unholy Trinity is a survival horror game by indie developer Airdorf Games, released as a full set of 3 games in 2022 alongside the final chapter in the series, with the first 2 chapters previously released in 2017 and 2019. The game takes place in 1987 and is stylized to emulate the video games of the same period, as the game follows a Catholic priest named John who sets out to fix an exorcism he botched. With your only weapon a cross, you can wave at enemies to exorcise them. Despite its retro aesthetic, the game is downright horrifying, in part due to a satanic story and mysteries that surround the game. One of these mysteries begins in the first chapter, as by ignoring the objective and walking away from your car, you can encounter a mysterious gray figure who laughs and drops a strange object before running away. The object, which apparently is a clown nose, doesn't appear to do anything when picked up and put in your inventory. And in Chapter 2, by heading back to this bedroom at a specific moment in the game when you're not supposed to, you can find another red nose in the closet, which again doesn't appear to do anything. The nose hasn't been found in the final chapter of the game. However, something was found in Chapter 3 that raises even more questions, as FunkyPG was playing the game when the lights suddenly go out while near apartment 2A, and left the game idle to check a guide on what to do next. But after about a minute of waiting, the game unexpectedly started playing endless audio of what sounded like a voice creepily whispering about a disturbing satanic cult.
Yes, agent, these documents include
While the details are sparse and disjointed, it seems to talk of a cult's plan to kidnap children and impregnate its cult members, and many other disturbing things such as secret dungeons they built under classrooms, and even a plan to assassinate the president. And in the same folder where these sounds can be found in the game data can also be heard a knock at a door. It's unknown where this knock is supposed to play or even if it can be triggered in game. But if I suddenly heard a knock at the door after hearing this shit, the last thing I do is invite anyone in. Endacopia. Thanks to Megapon, Gino, Empathy, and Kenny C for submitting this mystery on the Oddheader website and Discord. Endacopia is an upcoming point-and-click adventure game for Windows and Mac by the animator and YouTuber Andyland that currently has a preview available to download. In the game, the player controls the lost child Mello through a strange environment that resembles kid-friendly 90s edutainment titles like Pajama Sam, if it was called Pajama Sam and the Things You'll See on LSD. Endacopia is a surreal trip through a nonsensical world filled with anthropomorphic household objects and a few monsters, but jumps into straight-up horror territory when the demo's nearly over. In the game, a sign named Tip tells you to exit through the bathroom to end the adventure. Ignoring Tip's tip, you can instead climb through a painting to meet a freelance surgeon who sings about his love for his bride, who's actually 2 different bodies he stitched together. Something tells me he's not a real doctor. When asked about the bride, the surgeon mysteriously says that she's underground. And after exiting the painting, it was found that by clicking on the lights overhead they would make random noises, which if clicked in the correct order could suspiciously sound like the word underground. Which is exactly where we're headed, as Mello suddenly melts through the floor into a dark secret area. The area is intensely unsettling, filled with random objects like a giant comb, a sock, and teeth, all while extremely disturbing images flash on screen. Holy And if you don't want to know where those teeth came from, well, too bad, because the next image is those teeth being extracted. Oh! Well, at least it looks like they had plenty where those came from. Exploring further, we can find a diagram that appears to depict some sort of body mutilation. There's a door nearby with a timer that can be activated by standing in front of it while holding a candle that suddenly appears in your inventory, which is great because I want to get the f out of here right now. What the f? Is this the blushing bride? Interacting with the figure causes it to scream and convulse until the game crashes. This may be one of the most unsettling discoveries I've ever seen. Can I go back to the last room? I'd actually rather see the tooth extraction. Yet the mystery doesn't end there, as the crash causes an error message that contains binary code, which when translated reveals, "Oh Lord, we love how you suffer." Well, I bet they love this segment then. I think I've had enough suffering for today. Ultrakill. Thanks to Volejr and Polygon121 for submitting this mystery on Oddheader.com. Ultrakill is a first-person shooter platformer stylized like games such as Doom and Quake, released in early access on Steam in 2020. Ultrakill is one of the highest reviewed games on Steam, and for good reason, as you make your way through each layer of hell during a revolt against heaven as a machine called V1, who consumes the blood of enemies as a fuel source. However, Ultrakill has recently become notorious for its official UK butt mod released by the publisher, which adds support for a software called Buttplug.io that controls the vibrations of Xbox controllers, as well as, you can probably guess from the name. But with the only negative reviews of Ultrakill coming from players jokingly complaining about the lack of sex in the game, let's just say there was a demand in the market. However, what Volejr and Polygon121 found perhaps surprised them more than anything players experienced using the UK butt mod, as it was discovered on the level of Burning World. If you were to leave the enemies unkilled in the first area, then grab this skull later in the level, go into the next room where these burning bodies are on the floor, then go into the last room and place the skull where you found it, creepy audio would start playing that doesn't appear anywhere else in the game. What the? Is that a demon? Volejr also found they could trigger the audio with the use of mods to spawn in a husk drone or filth enemy in the same room. At this point, it's too difficult to make out what the creepy message could be saying, but I really hope it's not asking for the butt plug mod. D-Day. Thanks to SpeedWolf for submitting this mystery on the Oddheader Discord. D-Day is a real-time strategy game released in 2004 for Windows to coincide with the 60th anniversary of the real-life landing on the beaches of Normandy during World War II. The game recreates many battles won by the Allied powers on Normandy, as players can take control of various troops and weapons. However, SpeedWolf found something in the data of the game they're pretty sure was not present in battle during World War II, as SpeedWolf found various audio files titled Moloch, which when opened played a deep, menacing growl. What? Well, it makes no sense why this is here. It does make sense why a file named Moloch would play these growls, as the Moloch is referenced in the Hebrew Bible as a pagan god that accepted child sacrifices, who's been depicted as a bull-headed creature since the Middle Ages, as well as in works of literature such as Paradise Lost, where the Moloch is a fierce warrior in Satan's army who enjoys the thrill of war. What it's doing in the files of D-Day, who can even say? Let's just hope he's fighting for us. Hitman 2. Thanks to BeyondBaito for submitting this discovery on the Oddheader Discord. 2018's Hitman 2 is the 7th main installment in the stealth series by IO Interactive. While I've covered the game before for a mysterious humanoid bird statue guarded by lasers inside a secret room, players have uncovered another discovery in the game that somehow manages to be even more demonic than the last, as it was found by players such as Martino's on YouTube in the Miami Finish Line mission. There's a figure in this window that's apparently more than just some dummy. Text on a poster behind the dummy reads "Live Exercise in Progress," but when viewed through the sniper rifle, letters appear that change the message to "Live Exorcism?" And that's unfortunately only where the madness begins, as the dummy eerily moves around on its own. Weird. Well, glad that's over. Holy and now it's behind me. Alright, I'm out of here. Perhaps all of Agent 47's years of sneaking up on people and trying to kill them is finally catching up to him. Cyberpunk 2077. Thanks to Ralkia and Goon number 3 for submitting this mystery through Oddheader.com. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the most covered games on the channel, with many strange mysteries lurking across the decrepit Night City, which will likely only continue with the new Phantom Liberty DLC and the 2.0 update, such as the FF06B5 cipher, which remains unsolved to this day, and recently got me tossed from a live preview of the new expansion Phantom Liberty for asking too many questions. Many players, however, are still asking questions about a mission in the game titled The Hunt, where you dive into a brain dance of a comatose serial killer known as Anthony Peter Pan Harris and attempt to find Detective River Ward's lost nephew. Brain dance being a technology that lets you record and play back someone's experiences as you search their memories for clues. At one point during the brain dance in Anthony Harris's memory, Anthony is scolded by his father in a barn for almost killing a cow, apparently just like he did his mother, which is never actually explained, and then commands him to adjust the hormone levels of the cattle in the injection system control room. On the way to the control room, Anthony slowly approaches a curtain where a figure can be seen peeking through the other side. Yet when he opens the curtain, the figure suddenly disappears. Anthony continues his way towards the control system, and no mention of this figure ever occurs throughout the rest of the game. The player can actually pause the brain dance, go into editing mode, and see the figure behind the curtain before it disappears, although editing mode unfortunately doesn't provide a lot of detail. The player can also switch over to the thermal vision filter where the figure's body heat lights up before it instantly disappears. Some assume the figure is Harris's deceased mother, but submitter Ralkia scanned the figure by hovering over it and was provided the name Amy Mitchell, a name that doesn't appear to have any relation to Anthony Harris. The ability to scan this figure for its name, however, has seemingly been completely removed from the game in a recent update. Another strange moment also happens in the very next scene, where we jump to Harris's perspective as an adult as he watches a boy try to escape from the same barn. Submitter Goon number 3 found if you go into editing mode and move underneath the barn door before it shuts, you can get outside, where if you switch to thermal vision, you can see a figure mysteriously standing in the field watching the whole thing from afar. This figure is again never mentioned anywhere in the story, and trying to approach it unfortunately disconnects us out of range of the brain dance. Is it possible this discovery is implying that there's more going on behind the Anthony Harris murders? After all, a number of questions surrounding Anthony's story are never answered, and this figure almost implies the whole thing was part of an inside job, and that someone was checking on Anthony to make sure he followed through with the demands. Perhaps Anthony had a deal with the devil. Either that, or CD Projekt Red somehow managed to accidentally slip a lot of unintentional creepy stuff into this one scene in the game, which honestly is a pretty strong possibility. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, and if you know of any other discoveries you think came from hell, submit through Oddheader.com, come join the Discord, or even send me a shout through Twitter or Reddit. And thanks again to Slippy Slides for helping get the footage in this video. Feel free to subscribe to him down below as well. Shout out to Angel the Fox, Ash Photography, Bitwith27, Chad Biscuits, Ed Moffat, Eddie Talkspin the Bleach Primid, Flex, Justin Blackwood, Miss Arctic Foxy, Nerd Emoji, Puke Emoji, Clown Emoji, Cowboy Hat Emoji, Poop Emoji, Eggplant Emoji, Star of David Emoji, Phoenix157, Rackman22, Red Team Medic, Riley S, Robert Eisenman, Rolkot Miflua, Starcore 2, Terran Stock, Towerizer, and Chow Z for their Patreon support. Stay tuned.